As anyone who knows me personally will vouch, social justice is something very, very close to my heart. Now, I'm not talking about the wet and feel-good sort of social justice that the do-gooders love so much. I'm talking about seeking justice for people, real people. People who hurt because they've been wronged. More often than these days, I see examples where the law and those that are supposed to uphold it are on the wrong side of the ledger. I've seen some pretty appalling examples of the execution of the law in the past few years. Truth has been lost, lives almost lost. More often than not because of sheer bloody greed. But there are those of us out there who hold truth above all and are prepared to risk everything in the seeking of justice, regardless of the cost. Now, I'd like to think I'm one of those people. I like to surround myself with like-minded people, people of integrity and fortitude. So when I had Dr Alex Sharah from the men's justice movement on my show recently, the response from my viewers was absolutely overwhelming. In fact, of all the topics I've covered this year, this easily pricked the conscience of more people than any other subject. The comments on the show that night resonated with many, many people across Australia, if the emails I received are any indication. The responses were passionate. I could almost feel the pain flowing through the words that fell out of those emails. It was desperation, despair, and a sense of hopelessness, and they peppered every response. Now, there might be some section of the women's movement who want my guts for garters, but I don't back away from the big issues, and I don't back away from a fight. But few fights are fair. The law is skewed in so many areas against the innocent. But that's why I'm here, and that's why I have viewers like you, to address the balance. So tonight we revisit the area of men's justice. I'm Mark Barber-Luke, and you're watching Mark My Words. You can never say on Mark My Words I don't respond to what my viewers want. Now, the last time I had Dr Alex Sharah on the show, as I said in my intro, I had an enormous response. So it's my pleasure to bring him back here tonight because we have such a big topic to talk about and so much to talk about. Alex, thank you for coming back and making time to be with me.
Thank you.
A lot of this, in terms of, I guess, men losing their rights, goes back to the Family Law Act.
Well, Mark, in the 50s, men had their families and their home was their castle, and they took pride in having a wife and working for them. Now the social situation is very difficult for men. There's so much affirmative action for women. Even in the forces now, 54% in the army, and they're pushing the same in the police and in the Navy and Air Force, all pushing for increased female workers. We already have female-dominated employment in nursing, teaching, social work, and many other areas in society. There is no affirmative action for men, although some firms are very good and see the need to help men, and they do. So that's just in that particular. There's been this big switch with the idea that women have been cheated in the past, having to stay at home and having to look after children. There's now less emphasis on that, and there's much more emphasis on a woman having her own freedom of to live a life and not be dominated by family issues.
But would you say, Alex, that women have almost made it being feel guilty, as though that if they are a homemaker, if they're a mother at home, they're almost less of a person? That's what's been told to them, I guess, by the left.
Well, their children come home and make that point. Don't you want a life, Mum?
Do you think women are influenced by it, that they start to feel worthless, thinking to themselves, well, if I stay at home and raise my family, I must be doing something wrong because I'm not an active participant in the workforce?
Yes, I'm worthless. I'm nothing. Whereas they are doing the most valuable work possible. It's any man who stays home and looks after a child for a day is only too happy to pass the task back to his wife. Having a child or a family to look after at home is no great easy activity at all, and men discover it and learn to appreciate their wife a lot more because of that.
Because Alex, it goes beyond just, and I've always said this in previous shows, it goes beyond just doing the washing and the cooking, because you're teaching the kids. That's where the values are established. So many times these days we expect schools to teach ethical classes. We expect schools to pick up from things that should be done in the house and the home.
Well, I think today people don't feel adequate to pass on their knowledge. They're made to feel, somehow or other they've changed the curriculum in English, in mathematics and in history and so many things, so that what the parents were taught and what they knew seems obsolete, incorrect, and so they tend to sit back and leave it to the school. But that's not the main issue that I think you really want to talk about. What you really are concerned about now is the enormous change that's taken place as a result of sociological and legal changes during the 60s and 70s. And in the 60s there was the move for freedom, and that freedom meant freedom from all the past, freedom from tradition, freedom from all the wisdoms of the past. We were going to make the brave new world our own world. And so you had that phenomenon where people were dancing around naked and cavorting and doing all sorts of, taking drugs, and this was the expression apparently of a brave new world.
Do you think the Family Law Act in some way, though, codified those changes in the 1970s? Do you think that was the beginning of the end to a certain extent in terms of men's freedoms and rights?
I think, can I go back a little further, Mark? The strange things happened to the people's mentality and to society in the 60s with the advent of the pill and the idea of sexual freedom. Came on very quickly on the heels of that what was predicted by Pope Paul VI in his most lambasted encyclical Humanae Vitae in 1968, which didn't approve of the pill and didn't approve of sexual licence. He foretold quite correctly that it would lead to infidelity, abortion, family breakup, all sorts of crime and social disintegration. That was laughed at the time. However, if people look at the society that we have today, where fatherlessness is almost the norm, the single parent or the parent who has multiple partners and children have to adapt to that is the norm. We are seeing a phenomenon that began with the sexual revolution, and that sexual revolution began with the loss of moral certainty, which took place in the 60s.
Just bring it though towards the men and the situation men find themselves in today. I'm
leading up to that, Mark.
Okay, absolutely.
I'm leading up to it. Once you have abortion, what is sacred then about the fidelity between a man and a woman? When the product of that, the child of that, isn't sacred. So with that has come a demeaning of the role of the man and the family. And it wasn't long when you had the left-wing government that came in with Whitlam